All right. Ignore this big old thing on the screen. It's from the YouTube video where this randomizer was submitted. But right now we're just doing the prologue. The prologue itself is very consistent. Doesn't really matter as far as the speedrun is concerned. And doesn't really affect the rest of the run. So we're just going to skip past that. This is not scuffed, I swear. All right. So this is where the real speedrun begins, honestly. After the prologue fight, it's about 40 seconds of playing as Richter. In that fight, we fight Dracula, and yeah, it's pretty quick. We're hoping for damage stacks there, but overall, not very impactful for the rest of the run. This is the Castlevania Symphony of the Night randomizer. This is safe logic, which is the standard logic for doing a Symphony of the Night randomizer playthrough. The safe logic itself essentially just means that it does not require glitches or extensive knowledge of the game in order to finish a run. The logic itself is set up such that basically you could play through this game for the first time using this logic, and it is completable. Here, I'm attempting to speedrun it. At the beginning of the game, your starting equipment is randomized. The equipment that you're going to find throughout the castle is randomized. The relics that you find throughout the game are all shuffled within progression item locations. So, for example, the very first relic in the game normally is Cube of Zoe. Here I'm checking my items because the items you get at the start of the game are randomized as well. And if you have access to a library card, you can skip this sequence with death here, where death takes away all of your starting equipment. So all that starting equipment I had was nice, but I no longer have it. It is gone forever. But yeah, at the beginning of the game, the very first potential relic is the Cube of Zoe location, and it is right after these two skeletons. These skeletons guarantee item drops, so the first two items you get in the game are those two right there, essentially. And the first relic we're going to be having is Gravity Boots. Gravity Boots gives you access to a singular vertical jump that is quite high, goes up very quickly. This jump can't be chained, however, unless you have access to a dive kick, and having access to a dive kick is only possible with thrust swords or transformations or access to the leap stone. So if I find a thrust sword, if I find a transformation, or if I find leap stone, I'll then have access to doing multiple gravity jumps. Here I can only do a singular gravity jump, but it is still useful because this gravity jump gives me access to another relic check, which is right here, which is the leap stone. Perfect. So now I have access to doing multiple gravity jumps, which is nice, as well as the fact that the leap stone gives me access to a double jump and a dive kick. This double jump and dive kick combination gives me access to dive kicking into the ground. And if you dive kick into the ground and then let go of your movement, you get access to what is known as a front slide. And that front slide is what I just did right there. It gives you some forward momentum out of a double jump. It's quite nice if you want to preserve going fast. Here, having access to these relics early on makes movement very quick from the start, especially vertically. Although these gravity jumps do take MP from me, and now I no longer have enough MP to do a Tetra Spirit attack, so instead I'm waiting for the MP to recharge. So I could have managed my MP a little bit better in this section, but considering I'm not necessarily practiced with necessarily having this movement from the beginning. Another interesting thing you can do with the gravity boots is there is a way to give yourself a diagonal gravity jump from the ground, which isn't normally possible without doing like a frame perfect up, down, forward, and then jump on the same frame. So to do it not frame perfectly, you can actually buffer the diagonal gravity jump by pressing down, up to start the gravity jump, and then down, forward. And the fact that you stay in the crouching animation doesn't cancel your ability to do a gravity jump, but because it's reading the forward input, it gives you a diagonal gravity jump. Earlier, I got the Eye of Vlad, which is a Vlad relic. Vlad relics are required in order to beat the game in a glitchless manner. So if you collect all 5 of the Vlad relics in the game, it gives you access to the final boss fight in the second castle. In order to get to the second castle, however, we are going to need the Holy Glasses. The Holy Glasses will let us get past the Richter boss fight without killing Richter, which would initiate the bad ending. And bad ending is not allowed in speedrunning sense unless you're doing a bad ending category. But yeah, early on so far, I have access to a couple movement options. I haven't found anything useful as far as equipment goes. Normally, you're looking to find strong equipment. This version of the randomizer, it's a recently added feature, has actually randomized the stats and the icons and the names of basically all the equipment in the game. So the equipment that you're used to being you might be used to as a runner, as very strong equipment to use, has now been shuffled around. Perfect. Grabbing Soul of Wolf here kind of completes the all of the movement that you really kind of want for the first castle. Here, I'm going out of my way to collect this item because it could possibly be like a mana prism or like a potion that could be useful. But yeah, grabbing Soul of Wolf gives you access to a transformation. And transformations themselves are useful because they add additional mobility options and they unlock new areas for you to check. Specifically, the Aurochs boss fight is blocked by a section that Alucard cannot fit through normally. But with a transformation, you can actually fit through that wall. Here I find this item called the Nunchaku. I think this is the item that I end up using for the majority of the run once I end up checking its stats. And that's another Vlad relic early on. It's always nice to get Vlad relics early. It limits the amount of checks you have to do later in the game most of the time, especially if you're able to find all the Vlad relics early. Here I check all of my items because I find I'm in a good spot to do so. The Nunchaku that I have, this is a very interesting weapon. It has the attributes, it's been randomized to have the attributes of the Muramasa, which normally is not a very powerful sword. Its entire gimmick is that you level it up by absorbing blood. So there's certain enemies in the game that drop blood when you kill them using a sword, and you absorb that blood and that increases the stats of the Muramasa. But leveling up normally takes hours and hours and hours, so it's not useful for a speedrun at all. And leveling it up to any amount of useful damage is never would be done in a speedrun, honestly. But because the stats have been shuffled around, this Muramasa actually has decent stats. It has like basically endgame stats almost. It's almost it's like a middle tier, high middle tier sword at this point, but it's gonna one-shot basically every enemy in the first castle for me, which is great. And it'll also level up as I'm using it, making it slightly better in the long run. And this kind of weapon you would never see in a normal speedrun or even in a normal randomizer before the randomized stats were introduced, because this weapon would just be ubiquitously just tossed away because it's useless, because its stats are so bad. But now that the stats are randomized, it's going to be used in this run because its stats are actually good. And its attribute is quite nice because it has, it gives you access to a permanent dark metamorphosis, which is the red glow that you see around Alucard. This will let you heal off of blood as well. So you absorb the blood to heal, and it levels up your sword over time. So I just find it interesting that this sword is available in a playthrough of the randomizer now because the stats are jumbled around for every run. So it allows for more interesting build types in this game that would normally never be seen before. Here you can see that I'm absorbing the HP from the blood from those bloody zombies, and while doing so, I'm leveling up the sword. I believe the sword's level up progression is it requires exponentially more blood to level up after a certain point. I forget the exact equation, but it levels up pretty quickly early on, and then the leveling up slows down as you gain levels. And there's no way to really check those levels in game other than just checking your stats. So overall, I'm not necessarily concerned with the level up aspect of this sword. But another thing that is nice about this sword is that it has a very generous hitbox. The hitbox itself is quite large. It has a double hitting potential hitbox. So when you do a slash in this game, specifically jump slashes, if the hitbox is large enough and stays out long enough, it'll allow you to hit the enemy twice per jump slash. Sorry. But yeah, overall, it has a good hitbox. The hitbox is quite large horizontally as well. As you can see, all of the effects of the sword slashing around are part of its hitbox. And you can see I'm going for jump slashes here, so I can hit twice per slash, which is quite useful. Here I go for a Dark Metamorphosis because, I don't know, I think I was testing to see if it would do more damage or something like that. Oh yeah, Aurochs is giving me the Gatling Fire. That only happens if you let him stay at very low health before killing him. But overall, good fight. The fact that this sword is quite powerful allowed me to finish that fight quite quickly. That's probably the hardest boss in the first castle, Aurochs is. That or maybe Granfaloon, but Granfaloon just has more HP, I think, but isn't necessarily like a more difficult fight. Those are the Holy Glasses, so I now have access to the second castle. And it's only been 10 minutes into the run, so, or 11 minutes into the run. So this, finding the relics and progression items that I have found at this point has opened up the castle basically entirely to me. The only area I don't have access to right now is the caverns. And that's because the caverns themselves are locked behind the Jewel of Open, and the Jewel of Open is a progression item that I'm probably going to find somewhere, either in the first castle still and I need to find it just in an area that I haven't checked yet, or it's in the second castle and I'll have to traverse between the first and second castles in order to get all of the relics that I need in order to find more stuff. So there is an element of progressing between the two castles that does exist now in this randomizer. Sorry. Yeah, in the original version of the randomizer that Wild Mouse developed, the progression items themselves couldn't be shuffled around. So it basically guaranteed that the first castle would be, for the most part, fully explorable outside of maybe one edge case where the Merman statue is locked in the second castle. But now that progression items and relics can be shuffled around in different locations, that development has allowed for much more dynamic exploration of the castle. The routes that you're going to see in this version of the randomizer are a lot more dynamic. You're going to see a route that requires you to go back and forth between the first and second castle multiple times. This does increase the average length of the randomizer playthrough quite a bit, as well as the fact that more bosses have been added as location checks over as time has gone on. Before, the only locations were strictly relic locations being shuffled around, but now there are other locations that also can be added into the mix. For example, any progression items, so the items Silver Ring, Gold Ring, Holy Glasses, and Spike Breaker, those are items and not relics, but they are also now potential checks for the randomizer. There was also the guarded logic that was added around the second year of the randomizer, that Wild Mouse's randomizer's development. The guarded logic just essentially allowed for items that are behind boss locations instead of the bosses themselves dropping the item. Those areas also had potential to be relics as well. For example, the Scylla fight, behind Scylla is the Crystal Cloak, normally in the game, but it's now randomized in as a potential relic check. So it essentially means that behind every boss, for the most part, has the potential to also be a relic. This means on your average randomizer playthrough, you're probably going to be defeating pretty much every single boss, if not maybe skipping a handful depending on what kind of relics you find and where you find them. The other thing that this randomizer version does utilize is what's known as complexity depth. So for the safe logic that I'm playing here, I believe the complexity is 10. A way to think about complexity is how many locks you have to go through before finishing the game. How many steps of progression do you have to unlock before you're able to finish the game? And in the safe logic, it's 10 steps. So right now, I already have 4, it seems like, because I had access to the gravity boots, which was, you can consider that complexity level 1. And then that gave me access to the leap stone, which is level 2. And that gave me access to the wolf relic, which is complexity level 3. And then the wolf relic gave me access to the Holy Glasses, which was behind Aurochs. And that gives me access to level 4. So constantly you're adding layers of these locks together, and I'm keeping track of this during the run, so that way if I find myself, okay, I'm on complexity level 9, I only need one more item, and I should be able to beat the game based off of the way that the logic works. Keeping that in mind allows me to route on the fly where I need to go. Usually you want to follow a linear path through unlocking areas that are able to be unlocked linearly. So once you get access to a specific relic, for example, like if I got access to Mist, I would be like, okay, my next spot I should check is probably behind a Mist Gate, because that would give me access to another thing, which will unlock another thing, which will unlock another thing. 10 levels down the complexity chain, and then you should be finishing the game. They aren't always necessarily linear, but linear ends up being a very common way that these complexity chains end up working out. There are some branches that can branch out, and you do have to keep that in mind as well when running the game. So in general, you're basically going to be, as a runner, going through the randomizer, this version of the randomizer. Your primary goals are getting progression items quickly, and the best way to do that is to bunch checks together that you can when you're in an area. So if I'm close to an area and I have the ability to check it, it's usually optimal for me to check it just immediately, as quickly as I can. But I also have to keep in mind what complexity level I'm at in order to maximize the chance that I do find something useful. Right now I have, Silver Ring, Holy Glasses. Those lead me to believe, or Silver Ring leads me to believe that there is a chance that I might need to come back to the first castle later, once I have both Silver Ring and Gold Ring available, and that'll give me access to the Holy Glasses check. The other thing that in a normal randomizer playthrough that I'm going to be concerned with is finding equipment and utility that is going to be useful throughout the run. Some of the utility items that you're looking for are library cards. Those give you an instant teleport to the library, which is kind of a central hub for the castle overall. I'm about to be going to the library right now. By having library cards just opens up your routing options and gives you a fast way to go between the second castle back to the first castle. That holy symbol relic that I just picked up isn't necessary to finishing the run, but it is quite useful because it gives you access to being able to breathe underwater so you don't take damage when you're in water, and it gives the wolf the ability to be in the wolf transformation while in the water. So I have faster movement when moving as the wolf in water, as opposed to just being Alucard in water. Here I'm going to be using the wolf transformation for faster movement because I also have the power wolf relic, which gives me access to this dash that's fully invincible. It does cost MP to do, but once I charge up that dash, I'm fully invincible, and I do run faster as the wolf. Here's Echo of Bat. I can use that later on to safely check the Spike Breaker location once I have that as well. That's basically all it's used for, but it is nice to pick up for safety reasons. Otherwise, you would have to do a Blind Bat trick, which could be quite difficult. There I pick up Fire of Bat. Maybe I was confused with the sprite, because the sprite for Fire of Bat and Soul of Bat can be kind of similar looking. And one of the relic locations that I am checking now is the shop itself. The shop has the potential to sell a relic for 500 gold. There, it's actually the gold ring. Okay. With the name Ring of Varda. So now I have access to the Holy Glasses location, which is good to have. In general, you want to check as much as you can per castle before moving on to the next castle, because moving between castles is quite slow. So this is a instance of trying to bunch together checks as much as possible while also keeping in mind the complexity, because the complexity depth probably wants me to go to the second castle because I found holy glasses, and that's usually a sign of a linear complexion or complexity where I'll find something in the second castle that'll give me more progress to be made. Probably either Mist or Jewel of Open. Here I spend a lot of time in the menus because each individual item itself has a randomized sprite, has a randomized name, but the description of the item itself is going to give me a hint as to what that item actually is. So its attributes are based off of the description, and then the sprite and the name are kind of useless. They don't really mean much. And even on top of that, the attribute is described by the description, but its actual stats are shuffled amongst other items. So the stats can be completely random as well. So reading those menus takes a careful eye. You want to make sure to not go too quickly to miss something important, a specific item description that might give you a hint as to like a useful item, or some stats on an item that you might have passed up originally. Yep, here I'm going to be going to holy glasses. Oh, I'm going out of my way to test something actually in this run because I've never had the Muramasa before. And I wanted to see if it would curse Doppelganger. So this is just a little bit of on-the-fly testing that because I had an item that I never got to use before. And this boss, yep, he actually gets cursed here. So all he does is throw sub-weapons and he doesn't do normal attacks anymore. That's really funny. One of those things that I learned during the run that's pretty fun. But yeah, now we're on our way to the Holy Glasses location. Checking some items along the way, because I haven't been here yet. Yeah, those life vessels aren't useful to pick up for the most part. Unless you're dealing with items that actively lower your stats, for the most part, you're not really in danger of dying. At least until you get to the second castle. The second castle does have some enemies that can be difficult to deal with. Specifically, Nova Skeletons can do a lot of damage. Guardians can do a lot of damage. Rock Knights can do a lot of damage. So there are some scary enemies, don't get me wrong, but you don't really have to really buff your HP. And every time you grab a life vessel, it's like a 3-second animation. So wasting your time grabbing 10 extra HP for 3 seconds isn't really worth it overall. It's better off to just find ways to avoid taking damage anyways. And most enemies in this game, for the most part, are quite predictable outside of the Flea Men, Flea Armors, and Flea Riders. Those are probably the most random enemies that you have to deal with. Medusa heads could be random as well, but for the most part, if you play those areas conservatively with your movement and with your attacks, you should be fine. And if I'm not mistaken, this should be the last check that I have to do in the first castle that's available to me. Here, I'm just grabbing these items because I don't know what they are. They could have really good stats. Any of these items could be like a chrysogram with really good stats, or like just a good sword with good stats, or a good shield that I can use in conjunction with like a shield rod or a maul blown later on. So for the most part, you're doing a lot of equipment checks. Here I grab Power of Mist. That's not really required for progression at all. It's a useful relic to have, for sure. Because once you have the Mist ability, Mist plus Power of Mist makes you fully invincible and you can fly around it as the Mist. It's kind of slow, but it's very useful to just avoid taking damage. Here I get a little caught up in my movement. There we go. So yeah, I was mistaken. After checking the tracker, which is on the map itself for this randomizer, after checking the tracker, I noticed, oh, I have one more location actually, which is in the castle entrance. So I'm trying to plan around going to check that. I think I want to use the teleporter here, and I realize it's probably faster for me to go the other way. I might actually just be going to the second castle instead. This is kind of a gamble, so there is a chance that that item... Oh, I seem conflicted as to where I want to go. Yeah, this is a tough decision. So either you go straight to the second castle from here, which I might be doing. I was just waiting for that clock door to open. or you go check the item at the very beginning of the game, basically, which is kind of out of your way. It's probably like a minute time loss to go check that item, as opposed to going straight to the second castle. So yep, I think I'm going to the teleporter over in the Aurochs quarters, and if I remember correctly in this run, I do go straight to the second castle and skip that item check. I might do it out of safety. Again, it's more of a... Those kinds of decisions you have to make on the fly, and they have pros and cons. In a race scenario, this would be quite scary to make that call, because technically that relic isn't in the linear chain, that relic check. At castle entrance, it's locked behind it just flight, and I've had flight for a while, so there's a chance that it's not actually useful in like the complexity chain. But because there are branches that exist when chaining complexity together, it's also possible that that could end up being part of a separate chain altogether. So in general, I like to follow the linear paths of complexity as much as I can. Those tend to be the most consistent way of going through the game quickly. So skipping that check is fine for now. The only thing that would really suck is if that was the bat transformation. Because right now the bat transformation doesn't unlock anything for me immediately. But would help me with movement overall in the long run. Because having the access to the bat transformation gives you access to wing smashes, which is pretty much the fastest form of movement. It does cost MP, so you have to route your MP around, or route the wing smashes you do around how much MP you have. But it makes you fully invincible, and you fly through rooms very quickly as you do it. So it would have saved a lot of time if I had the bat in general, and in general, you're looking for the bat in a randomizer playthrough. But the bat can be literally anywhere, so... So going like a minute and a half, 2 minutes out of my way just to do a singular check, most of the time isn't worth it, unless it's part of the complexity chain or you have a good inclination that it will be something that will save you time or is required to beat the game. Because I'm going to be coming back to the first castle as well, I can route that check in later in a more convenient way where I'm doing multiple checks at the same time in that area. So that's basically, I think, what my game plan was in this particular scenario. Here it's routed in that you do the fight with Darkwing Bat first, because it's so quick. It's right there in front of you as soon as you enter the second castle. And once Darkwing Bat is defeated and you reload the room, or if you just wait out the animation, there's a chance that Darkwing Bat drops a relic. Because in the vanilla game, it's the Vlad relics are locked behind a couple of bosses in the second castle, and that's one of them. Ooh. Yeah, here I just duck under these tombstones. If you get hit by the tombstones, they curse you. And yeah, they do a decent amount of damage as well, but you can just crouch underneath them when they jump over you. That's a pretty safe way to get through this room. In hindsight, I probably should have transformed into the wolf and did the wolf dash through here, because the wolf dash is invincible once you build up enough speed. But I was probably under pressure at this moment and didn't really think about it. Here, I'm dive kicking off of these enemies to gain height. Gives me access to the save room. Every time you enter a save room, you refill your HP and MP to full, which is quite nice. Yep, here I start using the wolf movement a little bit more. One of the things that is unfortunate about this wolf movement is every time you do damage to anything, whether it's an enemy, whether it's some form of like a candle or like a wall or anything that takes damage, you lose like a good chunk of MP. It's probably like 5 MP. But if you're running through multiple enemies, you're constantly losing MP. Like, you can look at my MP bar, I'm losing like half of my MP in this hallway alone. Just to move like a little bit quicker. So sometimes it's not worth it to do the MP movement, or to do the wolf movement when it costs that much MP. And MP is required for doing gravity jumps, it's required for doing wing smashes once you have access to the bat. MP is very, very useful overall. here it seems like, yep, I'm trying to jump over these candles to do, so that way I lose less MP overall. Yep, here I barely have enough MP to make it through this section. But in general, you want to use up your MP, so it's not like you want to hoard your MP and not use it at all. You do want to use it as much as you can, because usually those movement options that require the use of MP are faster than just normal backdashing. So you want to use up as much MP as you can in between areas where you're either going to have a long period of time where you wait and then refill your MP, or you're about to get to a save room and then you can refill your MP to full from a save room. There are items that refill your MP to full. That's the Mana Prism. The Mana Prism itself is just a use item that you can randomly find in the castle. Yeah, and I don't think I find any Mana Prisms in this playthrough necessarily, in this run. If you have access to Mana Prisms, those are potions that are one-time use, unless you have the Duplicator item equip as well, and then you could use any amount of single-use items infinitely. It duplicates them as you use them, essentially. And that would give me access to infinite mana, which would be great, so I wouldn't have to worry about my MP consumption at all. But that item is quite rare. You don't always find it. In oh, here I learned that the Muramasa Blood Sword actually doesn't do damage to Akmadon. Akmadon is immune to curse damage, and the Blood Sword does curse damage. Here, I'm looking for a backup weapon. I'm just looking at the stats of all the weapons that I have to see if I have anything that could be useful. Here I found a sword that's not as powerful, but is something that I'll use instead. This is one of those like on-the-fly moments that the randomizer could produce. Here I'm using spells in conjunction with attacks. Spells usually give you about a second of invincibility, so here I'm using the Tetra Spirit spell, which allowed me to get through the Poison Cloud. This fight is honestly a lot more dangerous than it would be otherwise, just because I don't have a weapon. Or my main weapon just didn't do damage to Akmadon. And that's something that I had to figure out on the fly. And then I just go back to using my main sword. Because I don't think there's any other main bosses or bosses in general that are resistant to curse damage or don't respond to curse damage. So I'm pretty much fine from here on out. That was something that I didn't know until this moment, because I've never used this sword before in a speedrun. This sword and the Red Rust sword are the only two that do curse damage in the game, and they are both terrible. So for the most part, I don't want to use it. Here, I'm grabbing this in case I need another sword. If I notice that another boss that I didn't realize is immune to curse, So I'm looking for alternative weapons for specific scenarios, because each boss has its own strengths and weaknesses with different elements and different attack types. So being conscious of all of those is very important in a randomizer speedrun. This room is a little tricky because there's a lot of spikes on the floor, and unless you have the spike breaker armor, you're going to take damage when you touch them. And those spike damage, the spike damage itself is proportional to the amount of health you have. So it doesn't matter how much damage resistance you have in your armor or your levels or whatever. It doesn't matter. The spikes just do a percent base of your health. So they're quite scary overall. Here I'm checking these items because, you know, it's always nice to potentially find a library card. I don't think I have library cards at this point. So finding a library card in the second castle would be nice. It would save me a lot of time. Finding a duplicator as well is always useful because it will allow me to have infinite uses of any of the like potions or use items that I find throughout the castle. Here I'm using the wolf to get through this room because that room is quite scary. So it's definitely worth using the MP to get through that room. Otherwise, I'd have to like fight those enemies actually. Oh, this Asgall could be quite scary. I'm going out of my way to, yep, Ooh, I used the invincibility that I had after using that gravity jump to get out of there. That was actually quite clutch for me because the Asgard does a lot of damage. And then this next section, these enemies could be quite scary as well if you get hit by them. I think you can dive kick off of that werewolf, that last one that I just got hit by, instead of trying to kill it. But yeah, these rooms could be quite scary overall. The second castle, the enemies do a lot more damage than they would otherwise. But here I'm going towards the Castlevania 3 trio, Sypha, Grant, and Trevor. This fight, for the longest time, wasn't required in Randomizer, but Wild Mouse, the developer of the randomizer that we're using, recently found that there was an unused relic object in this room in the game's code, and was able to basically add a relic to this location, which normally isn't possible. The game doesn't allow you to just put relics wherever you want. It doesn't really work that way, but it just so happens that they probably planned a relic to exist here in like early builds of the game or something like that, and then had to remove it later on when they realized that it wasn't going to be in the game. But Mouse has been able to bring it back basically into the game, and there's the relic there. It's a fairy scroll, which isn't actually useful. All it does is brings up enemy names when they either do damage to you or you do damage to them. So, but yeah, still a required part of the randomizer. You want to check that stuff. One thing to note about the second castle in general, everything, once you have access to the second castle, everything is available to you immediately in the second castle, so everything is on the same complexity depth. So what that means is that if I'm looking for something specific in the second castle, for example, I'm looking for either a mist, like things that will open up more progression for me. The relics that I'm looking for are mist, merman statue. Oh, sorry, not merman statue yet. It's just mist and just Jewel of Open. But those relics can be literally anywhere in the second castle because they're all available to me. None of them have a higher chance of being somewhere else or only being locked behind certain areas. The entirety of the second castle is available to me. So in this situation, I'm going to be checking as much of the second castle as possible before returning to the first castle, because any of these locations has the possibility to be another progression item. So I can't like hedge my bets at all at any of these locations. That is until I find a progression item, that is. Because once I find a progression item, then I can make an educated decision on whether or not I want to go back to the first castle or continue in the second castle to find more progression items, possibly. Here, I'm doing what's known as a save split. What you do is you save the game, and then you go into a location to check an item or a relic. And if it's something that's not useful at all, you reset the game, and then you basically fast travel back to that save location. It's a save and quit abuse, essentially. But if you do keep the, or if the relic you find is useful, you just keep it and then backtrack normally. It's a way to mitigate time loss from doing checks in out of the way locations. For example, the check behind Beelzebub, which is where I'm going to now, has the potential to be another relic that could be towards putting me towards progression, but it also could just be nothing. So in order to hedge my bets, I go out of my way to save, to refill my HP, my MP, and save in case it's not anything important. And then if it's not anything important, I just reset the game using the soft reset feature. Or if it is something important, I just backtrack. Here, this fight is interesting. Beelzebub has a decent amount of HP. The only attack Beelzebub really has is he summons these flies to do damage for him. As well as there's these little worms that fall off of Beelzebub, and those can poison you, so you're really trying to avoid getting poisoned there. My strategy, if I don't have access to the bat transformation, is I break Beelzebub's legs, because all of his body parts can fall off after doing a certain amount of damage. There's the form of mist. So now I have to make the decision whether the form of mist is worth going back to the first castle to do more checks with, because it only gives me access to 2 locations. Or actually only 1 at this point. It only gives me access to the Soul of Bat location. So a possibility is you could also do a save split for something like that. That's an option that is quite popular if you need to go back to the first castle, especially if you have a library card, because it lets you check it quicker. Getting back to the first castle is quicker with a library card. Either way. But yeah, because the mist is a relic that could be potentially important, I'm going to go out of my way to backtrack through this area instead of going and resetting, because I might need to use the mist later. Most likely, I'm going to need to use the mist later. I think here I'm contemplating whether or not I want to go back to the first castle just for the one check, or if I want to continue and look for Jewel of Open in the second castle. Let's see what I do. I think I continue onward. Yep. Oh, no, I changed my mind. Oh, just kidding. I was building up more speed. That's what it was. So the reason I backtracked there is so I could build up speed to have the invincibility through this area. That's what it was. It looked for a second that I was going to change my mind and go back to the teleporter, but I did not. Ooh. This area is quite scary. These green skeletons are called Nova skeletons. They charge up a laser beam, and if you get hit by it, it does a chunk of damage, like in the hundreds of damage, depending on your equipment and how much... yeah, depending on your defense and damage resistance, stuff like that. Now that I have the form of mist, I have access to using the mist and the power of mist in conjunction. This gives me access to basically flying around as the mist, which is nice. I could use it to supplement my movement a little bit. Especially if I gravity jump and then hit a ceiling, I could then transform into the mist to move around that ceiling and then untransform. There, I'm just refilling my MP for the next section. The nice thing about Power of Mist as well is that you're fully invincible while you do it, while you're flying around as the mist. It just makes it much safer to go through rooms, especially with like large amounts of enemies in them. Coming up, there's a lot of very scary rooms here in the Inverted Caverns with Rock Knights, Blue Venus Weeds. They all do a lot of damage. They can hit you from across the screen. Quite scary stuff. So having access to a movement option that makes you fully invincible is quite nice. It does cost MP, but it doesn't cost that much MP overall. The funny thing about having access to the Power of Mist is it actually lowers the MP requirement. Here, the Doppelganger fight is actually quite interesting because the Doppelganger boss fights, both the one in the first castle and in the second castle, are affected by the stopwatch. So the fact that I had a stopwatch there means I could freeze Doppelganger and just hit him a bunch, and he has no iframes while I do it, which is nice. This room is quite scary. There's just a bunch of enemies in it. They do bleed, so it is one of the nice areas that I can level up my Muramasa here. So every time I'm collecting HP from the blood there, I do add to the strength of the Muramasa over time. I think that was my what I wanted to do here. I really wanted to lean into using the weapon that I found here, because it seems like it's going to be my primary weapon for the rest of the game. That's the sword card, basically a useless relic. Familiars in general in safe logic aren't very useful. There is an edge case of using the fairy card in order to refill your MP, because what ends up happening with the fairy card is the fairy is a familiar that essentially just uses items for you if you end up in a situation where you need those items to be used. For example, if you get poisoned, the fairy will automatically search your inventory and then use like an antidote for you to heal your poison. So that way you don't have to waste time being in the menus and stuff like that. That alone can be useful. But one of the things it's very useful for actually is if you have the life apple item, it gives you a full revive if you die. And you can intentionally take a death abuse and revive, and that revive completely refills your MP as well as your HP. So you can use up a bunch of your MP, and then if you want to refill your MP, you can intentionally take a death and then revive using the fairy. This is known as Daigon strats because it was popularized by the runner Daigon. Shoutouts to Daigon. But yeah, overall, I'm just in the second castle. I think I've committed to fully checking the second castle at this point. for the potential of finding more Vlad relics, because Vlad relics could be essentially at any level of complexity depth, because they don't necessarily add to the complexity until you have all of them. So essentially the last Vlad relic is the most important when it comes to searching for your complexity. Overall though, here I think I might have, I didn't do a full save. I think I just refilled my HP and MP there. There is a route where I would save split there, but actually I think I might have, because I don't think I've checked creature yet, if I'm remembering correctly. And the creature check is one of the most out of the way checks in the second castle. And one of the ways that it's commonly checked is with a save split, doing a save split here in the caverns, and then going back to check it later. Or sorry, save splitting in the caverns and then immediately checking the creature check. And then if it's nothing there, you just reset. And then you're back in the caverns immediately. It's like a 2-minute check in general. It takes a long time to check, especially if you don't have access to Bat, because Bat would allow you to just fly through the rooms quickly. But because all I have access to right now for movement is my normal backdash and the wolf relics, it's actually quite slow to go that way, so I opted to just not go there in general. Yeah, the sword I'm using is decently powerful, but overall it's still not the most use. It's not like super duper powerful. Like if I was using like some of the best weapons in the game, I would be killing these bosses in mere seconds. But these are taking like tens of seconds in order to defeat these bosses. Kind of a small, time difference, but the difference between the absolute top tier weapons and weapon combinations in this game and like the middle tier is quite significant overall. Ooh, am I actively avoiding checking Galamoth here? Yeah. So I guess at this point I've made enough progress that I feel comfortable going back to the first castle. There are 2 checks left in the second castle for me right now, which is behind the Galamoth boss fight and behind the creature boss fight. Both of those areas take a very long time to progress into those areas. And because I'm fairly certain that the complexity is gonna force me to go back to the first castle right now anyways, instead of going all the way over there to check to see if it's a Vlad relic or whatever, behind either of those, I'm gonna wait until I have better movement options, specifically the bat, before coming back here. I guess that's my game plan. So likely what is behind the bat location, which is the only thing I have access to checking in the first castle, what's there is probably going to be Jewel of Open. And that'll give me access to the caverns in the first castle. Nice movement there, a little wolf jump. But overall, yeah, I'm just going to be using this teleporter now to go back to the outer wall, because the outer wall is the closest way for me to get to the library again. But yeah, the backtracking aspect of the randomizer is, I think, accentuated a lot in safe logic. The safe logic itself, most of the time, most seeds have you going back and forth between the first and second castle. It's very rare that you fully clear one castle and then go to the next. For the most part, you're going to be going back and forth at least 1 to 2 times. But it does show off the different ways that you can maneuver through the castles and with different movement options available to you. For example, using the wolf this much wouldn't be seen in a normal speedrun of this game. Because for the most part, the wolf isn't the best form of movement in general. The best form of movement that you can get reliably is the bat. So that's basically why every single speedrun, or main category speedrun for Symphony of the Night gets the bat as soon as possible. Because the bat is the most consistent and fastest form of movement in general. This is the bat location in the vanilla game, but we're going to see what's behind it. And it is Jewel of Open. So yeah, that's the most likely scenario. I couldn't see a world where that could be anything else really, and that the rest of my progression was locked behind something else. That would have been extremely unlikely. It's probably possible, but very unlikely. This was the most likely scenario. This Jewel of Open will give me access to the caverns in the first castle, as well as the mines and the catacombs. There are some checks that I will be able to do that are out of logic. I believe overall I haven't done very many out of logic checks. The way that the safe logic works is that it assumes that you don't have extensive knowledge of the mechanics of this game. So there are checks that are available to you earlier in safe logic than intended for the logic to account for. And some of those checks are pretty deep in the complexity chain, specifically for this logic. So it's nice to be able to check those early, and it gives you a sense of how the chain, you can essentially skip progression in the complexity chain and see the end of the chain, and then you can try and work your way back from there as well. The best way that this is mostly used is by checking either Silver Ring or Spike Breaker locations early. Doing so doesn't require any glitches necessarily, but it does require use of mechanics that aren't necessarily known or well known to like a casual player, and that's what the safe logic is designed to do. It's designed to give you a logic that is safe for someone who's just like casually playing through the game. But it also is the logic that allows for the most skips essentially in complexity, which allows for the seeds on average to be completable faster. It looks like I'm going to be checking the Silver Ring first, which is smart to do. Doing the quickest deep complexity checks first usually is your best bet once you've collected a lot of progression items, and it'll allow you to work backwards as to what the seed wanted you to do. So the way that we're going to check the Silver Ring out of logic, normally you're required to use the Spike Breaker armor to get through these hallway, or to get through this hallway. But instead, I'm using the Mist and Power of Mist together, which gives me full invincibility, and I'm going to go through the Spike Room that way. At the very end, though, I need to have some amount of invincibility, so that way I can open this blue door, which these blue doors only open once you have Jewel of Open, which is why I haven't been able to check this yet either. So here I'm going to use a potion for the invincibility, and that'll get me through the blue door. And this gives me access to this check out of logic. The game's logic assumes that you have Spike Breaker at this point. Finding the Merman statue there is good overall because it'll allow me to do more checks quickly than I would be able to otherwise, especially if there's something required behind what the Merman statue unlocks. The Merman statue itself unlocks a singular check, so it's essentially just a prerequisite for an extra check later on, which is where the holy symbol becomes active. All it does is it allows the ferryman to spawn in and do a cutscene and then open a door for you. But it could be required. So that's why finding it now is really nice, because I'm about to go to the caverns, which is where the ferryman is. So it'll save me on backtracking the fact that I found this first. As opposed to if I went to the caverns first, I wouldn't have been able to do that check, and then I would have done this check later, and then I would have had to go back again to check it. Oh, getting a mana prism drop there is quite nice, especially if I can find a duplicator. It looks like I do have some mana prisms already. Looks like I have 2. So I'm going to use it now to refill my MP, because this section does require a decent amount of MP to get through. Here, yep, I'm just gonna re-equip the blood sword that I've been using this whole time. Doing 92 damage per slash is okay. It's slightly above average, I would say, especially for a weapon that can double hit. That's actually decently good. I would probably say that that's like a B+ tier weapon, when like an S tier weapon would be doing over 100 damage and doing damage like probably like 10 hits per second or something like that. Those are like the top echelon weapons that are available to you in this game. Something like a Chrysogrim with high damage, or using the Alucard shield rod spell. That gives you access to a lot of damage very quickly as well. So now I have to activate the switch that'll get me access to the caverns. Overall, you can see that I'm picking up different sub-weapons. In general, your sub-weapons don't really matter. You can't even grab sub-weapons normally unless you find the Cube of Zoe. So most runs, you're not really relying on sub-weapons. They can be quite powerful for some boss fights. For example, Holy Water is a very useful sub-weapon for a lot of boss fights. Specifically Akmadon. Akmadon gets completely destroyed by Holy Water. You don't even need to use anything else. Just Holy Water alone can kill Akmadon very quickly. And same with a couple of other bosses. But in general, you don't rely on sub-weapons a lot in the randomizer, because most of the time you don't even have access to Cube of Zoe, or you just end up skipping it. Interesting, I'm going straight for this check down here. Yep, so this is the area that Ferryman wouldn't be here unless, until you have access to the Merman statue relic. So this relic has the potential to be something important, or it could just be nothing, and it was just a waste of time. That does happen quite a bit in this game. All of these, this section is basically like an auto-scroller. You can't really speed it up. So the items that I go out of my way for are free item checks. They don't cost any time at all. This is one of the nice things about having access to Holy Symbol, is that as the wolf, you can move underwater, and your top movement speed is slightly faster as the wolf than it would be as Alucard most of the time. And this is the Soul of Bat. This gives me access to all the fun movement that I've wanted. Wing Smashes, it's a pretty... it's basically the main form of movement for Soten speedrunning in general. You want to get access to the bat as quick as possible, so that way you can do these Wing Smashes. You're fully invincible while you do it. The input to keep a chain going is you hold the jump button and press up, and then do a 3/4 circle from back down to forward, and then release the jump button. It's a pretty complicated input, but with practice can be very consistently done. Here I'm doing some more item checks, it seems. But yeah, you're fully invincible while you do it. You do damage. Like, I think I'm just going to kill Scylla outright, yep, with these Wing Smashes. So you do a decent amount of damage. The main form of using this movement to your advantage, however, is with doing what's known as infinite Wing Smash chains. So the Wing Smash itself is a singular spell that has a set distance. And if you redo the input within 64 frames, well, 63 frames technically, before the 64th frame of the animation of doing your first Wing Smash, if you do the input again, it'll basically overwrite your previous Wing Smash timer with the new one that you just did. And then you have 63 frames again to do the input before you could do another one. And every time you do this input, you do lose 8 MP. So these Wing Smashes do cost MP overall. There I go out of my way for the stopwatch, because the stopwatch is useful for stopping enemies that might give you trouble. But for the most part, it's the sub-weapon with the most possible utility. But yeah, now that I have access to the Wing Smash and the Bat transformation, that's going to be my main form of movement for the rest of the run. Yeah, doing these long Wing Smash chains, if you look at my MP bar in the top left, you're going to see it constantly like chunking down, little by little. That's every time you see it go down in a chunk like that, that's me doing another Wing Smash input. The other thing I need to keep track of is how many wing smashes I'm able to do by looking at my MP bar. I don't have like a number that I can see. All I can do is kind of relate how much the MP bar is ticking down per wing smash and kind of estimate how many wing smashes I have left. But yeah, so a big part of doing runs where you don't have access to infinite mana is you're managing how much mana you have per section. And one of the ways that you can maximize the amount of mana that you get per wing smash is by doing a dive kick into a bat transformation. It preserves your horizontal momentum during the transformation. So you have this very fast dive kick forward. Oh, nice, Heart of Vlad. That's another Vlad relic that I needed to have. So skipping it until now was actually optimal because I have faster movement to grab this relic. I could have checked this relic a long time ago, but it would have been slower because now I'm checking it using bat movement as opposed to using the wolf movement, which would have been slightly slower. And I'm combining this check with other checks as well, so it's saving me movement on backtracking. But yeah, overall, managing your MP through these sections is quite useful. If you have access to mana prisms, maximizing the mana prism, the amount that it actually helps you is very useful. But you're going to see me do a lot of dive kicks into the bat transformation into a wing smash because it's one of the most MP efficient ways of using your movement. It's not as fast as just constantly wing smashing and keeping wing smash chains going, but that does cost a lot more MP. So you want to kind of balance between using up all of your MP before save refill, refilling it at a save station, that is, refilling your MP, and just going as fast as you possibly can. So for the most part, optimally, I want to use up basically my entire MP bar before refilling at a save station. And for the most part, there's like specific MP save stations that we visit and some that we intentionally skip because they are pretty far out of the way and they don't actually save that much time, even if they fully refill your MP. Yeah, here you see I'm going for a jump slash to do 2 hits back to back on Cerberus there. And then I go for a grounded attack to crouch under the fireball that Cerberus throws there. That's a pretty standard way to fight Cerberus. We're going to be checking the Demon card relic right here, and that's another Vlad relic. Likely the last Vlad relic is going to be behind Spikebreaker, if I had to guess. Because that would have finished the complexity chain. Because in this version of the randomizer, it's implied that you check the Spikebreaker location using Bat and Echo of Bat. I think I just go straight there. The normal route you do if this is your first time visiting the catacombs is that you save the game and then check the Grand Falloon location first and then check Spikebreaker afterwards. But because I'm very confident that this is the very last Vlad relic and then I'm in go mode and I can finish the game, I go out of my way to do this first. That's the use of Echo of Bat to see where I'm going in that spike room. That's the casual way to get through the room. You can get through that room completely blind. It is difficult somewhat. It's very consistent with practice. But at this point, it can be MP inefficient overall because you have to use like a wing smash to use invincibility to get through some of the spikes. Yeah, so it's just a little bit safer to do it that way, and it doesn't really cost time at all. But yeah, that was the last Vlad relic. I was accurate in my assessment that that would be the last Vlad relic. So my my hunch was correct. So yeah, the randomizer itself is random, but it follows a logic. It follows possible steps. Like items can't be behind an area that unlocks itself. For example, you're not going to find the form of mist locked behind a mist gate because then the mist would be inaccessible. So the logic itself, what we do when we're speedrunning the randomizer is we're trying to read the logic as we play through the seed and then try and predict where specific items and relics are going to be based off of that. using that in conjunction with reading the complexity levels as well. Usually the last Vlad relic is going to be at the highest possible complexity area based off of what relics and items you got previously. That's usually like a safe rule of thumb. In specifically safe logic, but a lot of the other logics work the same way as well. Yeah, we're coming up basically at the end of the run here. The only two boss fights that I have left are Shaft and Dracula. The only two locations, if I'm remembering correctly, that I skipped, because for the most part you don't end up skipping a lot of relic locations, and skipping relic locations saves you a lot of time. So if you're able to route out ways that you can skip these locations, it's quite nice. It looks like the two that I ended up skipping ended up being two of the longest possible checks, which is the creature check, which takes like 2 minutes, and then the Galamoth check, which can take upwards of like 5 minutes, depending on how long it takes to kill Galamoth. So being able to skip those two checks is quite nice overall. There, I just got caught in my movement, I guess, whatever. Yeah, it looks like I'm judging I have just enough MP to make it to the very end of the game, so going out of my way to refill my MP would have been slower overall. But here this is a teleporter location that I opened earlier. And this is the closest teleporter location to the very end of the game. So here I'm just going to be doing some wing smashes, some gravity jumps, basically maximizing my movement potential based off how much MP I have to get to the very, very end as quick as possible. It looks like I'm just about to run out of MP, yep. So I'm going to go out of my way and do some front slides here. These are quite difficult to do, these front slides against the ceiling. The fact that I got 3 in a row there is actually quite impressive, to be honest. Because the way that the front slide works is that you have to let go of all of your movement right after doing the dive kick. So you're pressing down forward to dive kick and then immediately releasing the movement button. You probably have like maybe a frame or two to do it. So those are pretty difficult. Specifically because your head is so close to the ceiling, and that forces you to be very close to the ground that you're trying to front slide into. Getting 4 front slides in a row in that room is considered the ASD strat. ASD is a runner that is very, very good at doing those front slides. But yeah, that's the end of the game pretty much. We're entering the last 2 boss fights. In general, you don't really need a lot of MP for the boss fights, specifically if you have good weapons. My weapons are okay. I'm probably going to use maybe a Tetra Spirit or 2 for the invincibility frames that it provides, as well as a couple of the damage that it can do to Shaft. Specifically Shaft being a difficult boss to fight in a way, mostly because his patterns are quite random. The orbs that fly around will fly at you. They'll bounce around the room. They'll shoot at you like fireballs and then create pillars of flames. So it can be difficult to fight Shaft. Here I'm testing out to see if this weapon is doing more damage. I don't think it will do more damage. Oh, it does do a decent amount of damage. Never mind. One of the nice things about you having the Spirit Orb active to see how much damage I'm doing. This is the Girthang weapon. I don't think its stats are as good as the actual Girthang that you would get in the vanilla version of the game, but one of its things that it does is that it increases how much damage the weapon does and makes its hitbox better if you have Dark Metamorphosis active. So overall, both swords I end up using both have like blood attributes, which is quite interesting. It's a interesting build overall. I think I'm just going through my different weapons at this point because I'm just curious to see what weapons I have available. Overall, it's just faster to just start the fight with Dracula. In general, the way that the Dracula fight works is that each Dracula fight has specific phases. So phase 1, or considering like a 1 cycle phase, is these hand attacks. Dracula always does like swings with one hand, and then depending on what position you are on the screen, will swing with the hand that's closest there. After doing a couple swings, Dracula will then do this attack where he just closes both hands together. And if you can't kill him before that, he goes into this mode where he is not able to be hit. So in general, killing Dracula in a 1 cycle tends to save about a minute compared to like a 2 cycle or 3 cycle. Basically every cycle adds an extra minute. Yeah, this second cycle has Dracula using various different attacks that aren't in the first cycle, so it ends up being a little bit more difficult. Yeah, here I was just uncertain which weapon I ended up wanting to use, so I just used this weapon. The Muramasa Bloodsword. I think Dracula resists curse damage a little bit, so it wasn't as effective, and that's why I wanted to try different weapons out, but overall, pretty fast fight. Final time being an hour and 10 minutes. But yeah, thank you very much for watching.